Welcome to Project Insight's Professional Development Series. Today's session, Project Management for Nonprofit Teams, is designed for mission-driven organizations working to deliver big outcomes with limited time and capacity. When projects involve multiple teams and stakeholders, it's easy to lose clarity on priorities, ownership, and next steps. This session focuses on a practical, lightweight approach to keeping projects on track without adding unnecessary processes. A few housekeeping notes. Everyone will be on mute. Please feel free to use the chat throughout the session to ask questions. Feel free to drop a note right now from where you're joining from if you've not already done so. Thank you to those who have. Today's session is valid for one PDU certificate. As always, the trick is you need to stay until the end of the session to be able to have access to that. This recording will also be accessible from the link that you've joined with. I'm Mathew Sparks from Project Insight. With me is Steve West, founder and CEO of our organization. We're also very excited to welcome Stacye Thrasher Brim, founder and principal consultant at STP Consulting, who specializes in helping purpose-driven organizations build practical, scalable projects and operational processes. Before we get in, Stacye, would you mind sharing a little bit more about yourself with us?
Sure. Well, I'm excited to be here for this conversation. I am Stacye Brim, founder and principal consultant of STP Consulting, and I work primarily with mission-driven organizations. That's nonprofits, foundations, some public sector organizations in the areas of both strategy and project management. So on the strategy side of the house, I help with strategy development, building that 3 to 5 year organizational strategic plan, as well as helping with strategy execution so that plan doesn't just sit on the shelf and go dusty. That kind of transitions to my project management side of things. I teach project management fundamentals trainings to leadership teams so they can all speak the same language. I help them put project management practices in place. And I also coach project managers one-on-one. So I love both strategy and project management. I get excited and passionate about both, and I'm happy to have this conversation today.
Great.
We're so excited to have you. Yeah.
Yeah, it's always great to learn something new, and I'm looking forward to your presentation.
Thanks so much. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. And this is what we're going to cover today. So as you can see from the title, we're going to talk about why tools alone do not improve project execution, and we'll talk about why. We'll talk about what needs to be in place before you even think about implementing a project management tool. We'll also discuss a simple framework for strengthening how projects are executed in your organization. And of course, we'll share how a portfolio and project management tool can then support your work after you've established this foundation. And then at the end, we'll have time for a little bit of Q&A and talk about how you take this information shared today and move forward.
Great.
So, why tools alone don't solve execution challenges? I've had many an organization say, yeah, we're struggling with coordination and how we get projects done, but we're going to get a tool. And tool alone does not solve your execution problems. You know, it can't fix unclear priorities or lack of alignment. And even the best tool won't help if your process is not defined. You know, tools really work best when they support a strong foundation. And so that's why we're having this conversation today and talking about some steps you can put into place to help you build a foundation that tools can support. And I'm sure you, Mathew and Steve, see this as organizations come and talk to you about a tool.
Oh yeah, all the time, right? You have this idea, I think, you know, it's usually one of two. It's the first organization like you described where somebody has this big bright idea that we're the silver bullet for all of their problems, right? And the reality is we're not, right? Unless you have those predefined processes to get in here, we're not going to make things more streamlined. In fact, it may even be more aggravating for people to, you know, have to go over here, you know, to do something where it's not defined.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, let's go on to the meat of our conversation. And so when organizations struggle to execute their projects, it's often not a tool issue. It's really a clarity and process issue, as we've said. And so these are the 5 things we're going to talk about today. We're going to talk about starting with a portfolio view. We'll talk about how to start projects, how to initiate them. making planning a discipline, not an afterthought, and want you to be intentional about how you're going to track progress and then how you can close projects with intention. So those are the things we're going to cover during our time together today. So let's start at the top. Very first thing I encourage organizations to do is really to start with a portfolio view. Before processes, before software, you just really need to know, what is the organization working on? I hear organizations tell me that they don't, they have a lot of silos in their organizations. They don't know what, the legal team is doing, they're on the policy team. We don't know what the programs team is doing. And so really a great place to start is to list all of your active projects, and even those that are waiting in the wings, so kind of a backlog. And then for each project, note who's on the team, project manager. They might not have that title, but who's leading the work, who is on the team supporting the work, who's doing it, what's the timing? So what's the planned start and end date or actual start date if it's already started? What is the intended outcome of that project? Why are you doing it? And then what's its status? Where is it in its project life cycle? And really just having a simple table alone is very powerful to have that portfolio view. And for some organizations, when they do this exercise, they're really just seeing the breadth of what they're doing for the first time. And it gives them validation of, oh, this is why we feel overloaded, because you are, right?
Yeah.
It helps surface priorities, maybe some conflicting projects where you're overcommitted, etc. And so one of the things I also encourage organizations to do when they're pulling this list together is to connect that project to your strategic plan. Why are you doing the work? What objective or goal is this work supporting? So this can also give you a view of, hey, this is what we're doing, and this is how we're moving our mission forward. So this is just a basic first step that organizations can take before even diving into a tool. But of course,
and we find when we onboard new customers, this is almost always the first thing, or either that or the request list of the things they're planning on doing.
Yeah.
And just that exercise of bringing everything together, because most of the time, like you said, it is in a lot of different lists. It could be a PM system or an Excel or in Jira or DevOps, and each team has their own tool. And then a lot of teams, maybe what they're doing is cobbling that together manually, but sometimes maybe not even being able to do that because so many different things. So I agree that just getting everything together at the highest level provides some big values.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, what I think it makes it nice, for applications, like ours, Project Insight as a whole, is that we use this approach of, add-ons for the feature set. So you can allow everybody who's maybe using sticky notes right now for the time being, right? For what I'm managing, and you've got a fancy spreadsheet. Good on you, Stacye, but I'm using these over here, right?
That's right.
Is you do have the ability to have just a simple project input process where you can come in here and just say, hey, I'm going to add this work. This is what it's a part of. Here's the priority on it. I'm in charge, like you're mentioning, and then kind of go through there with that visibility.
Well, the other thing is that when you do this particular exercise, we'll find that, different teams use different terminology for like what you said, the status or the phase of the projects. Team A might use one set of terminology and another team might use another terminology. So when you start to put everything into your portfolio and bring it together, it kind of forces the conversation of how are we going to refer to these things in a ubiquitous way so that we can compare apples to oranges or stop comparing apples to oranges, have it be apples to apples. So definitely agree with you. Getting the portfolio together, just starting there is a huge step forward for a lot of organizations that if they're not already doing that.
Absolutely. I know, Matt, you brought up the sticky notes, but it's sticky notes, it's people's heads, it's spreadsheets here. It's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
So
right.
Do you have do you have any guidance for people, like as far as just when you talk about, you earlier you alluded to, aligning these projects with your goals. Is there any advice on, like, do you divide up your portfolio in a certain way, or are we going to get into that more further in the, like, how would they name or define what those portfolio view is?
So we'll talk about that here and also in the next step as well. But here in this portfolio view, say you're creating just a spreadsheet, and you will have different columns for the project name, project manager, resources on the team, start date, end date, status. And then there can be a column for strategic goal. So which one does it align to? So is it goal C about XYZ? Or even is it goal C, objective, blah, blah, blah. So you can have those as columns in this spreadsheet. So you can get a nice view of, oh, we have 5 projects supporting this goal. We have none supporting this goal in our strategy. And maybe that's okay. And it's intentional, but it allows you to be intentional with your decision making. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. Good stuff. All right. Well, then let's talk about the next step, unless there's anything else you want to share with us on this one.
I think this is really straightforward. Great advice.
I've got an example of what that could look like within, either Excel or in an application, right? Obviously, what I'm going to show is within Project Insight as a whole, but this is, I think, exactly what Stacye was mentioning, right? It doesn't need to be this large, complicated process. It can just simply be, hey, this is the initiative that we're doing. This is what we're trying to take on. It gives you really clear visibility into knowing that, hey, it looks like employer partnership pipeline is maybe something we're not doing as much of compared to other initiatives. But maybe, to your point, Stacye, that's okay, right? Maybe that's part of what the initiative is. This is a report within Project Insight, and this is, as simple as it has to be able to track data points within our tool. What the project is, who's in charge of it, whether they use that nomenclature of project manager. I might not know anything about project management, but I'm sure as heck know how to run an initiative within our org, right? So
that's right.
That's what it is. If you are tracking things like phase, like Steve was mentioning, this is a great time to, collectively come together and say, what should we call this? Should we refer to this as execution? Should we call this as Matt's blue sticky notes, right? Probably not that one, but you can do whatever you want with those. This is just a really easy way to do this. The nice thing about our application is it becomes able to visualize really easily for different people, right? I might like this Gantt chart view of where I should be on my projects, although it's still the exact same data points that we were just looking at, who's in charge, what's the priority, but this gives me a little bit more visual representation. Or we even have a portfolio view where I can then understand who's in charge of each of those initiatives. What are the projects happening within those pieces of work? And then have different predefined views, again, that are more made for my working methodology. So if I want to move the phase or the health or something else with a board view, this might be what clicks with me and my love for sticky notes, right? Without having to, reinvent the wheel every time we want to display or work together differently. So.
Yeah, and obviously, we're biased to saying you should use a tool, because if that list that Matt started with was in a spreadsheet, then if you wanted to have a Kanban view, you would have to go and build that manually and so on and so forth. But so obviously putting, the exercise of gathering the data, though, this tool isn't going to work if you don't actually spend the time to put the list together and then load it in, right? So the tool just kind of gives you a ability to slice and dice it, but the real challenge is, what are all the projects, gathering them all up, what are the values of those, all those columns, and doing that exercise, and then when you put it in a tool, it magnifies that exercise.
Yeah, absolutely. And Matt, you showed us a portfolio view, and just like an Excel spreadsheet, it's configurable, right? You can add a column for, strategy alignment. So, that's the lovely thing.
Spot on. That's exactly the goal of that, is to make it easy to be able to do without worrying about breaking formulas or anything else, right? Which sometimes I know I've added things in Excel and been like, oh, please work, please work, please work, So yeah, absolutely.
Exactly. Good stuff. All right, well, let's talk about step 2. So we talked about getting a portfolio view. Let's see what we're doing across the organization. And really the second thing I want to talk about is being very clear and intentional about how projects begin in your organization. In many different organizations, projects can start without a clear intake process. Sometimes anyone can kick off a project. You don't have to have a certain role in the organization. Projects can be kicked off via just an email or a casual comment in a meeting or the meeting after the meeting, right? Mm-hmm. Where no one's looking at, is this project aligned to our organization's goals? It's a little bit ad hoc. So I really encourage organizations to define how new work is requested. And if they want it to be approved, how should it be approved? Who has the authority to approve it? I want you to think about how are projects and why are projects started? Are they driven by the strategy? Are they reactive because someone's requested something for you? How are priorities set? How's the backlog managed? Because you've got this huge portfolio of active projects, but then you might have some that are on the side or a backlog. Right. So how do you decide which ones you're going to do next? And so just as important as getting this big picture view of what are we currently doing and plan to do, I encourage organizations to be intentional and set a process around how projects should begin. Who has the authority? How are we starting it? Getting agreement on projects that we're going to move forward with, and do we have the resources? And a tool that I often recommend to clients is a project charter. And it's a great tool to list, what's the name of the project? Who's going to lead it? Who should work on it? High-level timeline information, high-level scope. Mm-hmm. And it's really a lovely tool to help you even decide, should we move forward with this project, right? You've got enough information, enough thinking without detailed project planning at that point to see how it fits into your whole portfolio. And do we have the capacity and the resources to do it? So that's also where you'll include a note on how this work aligns to your strategy. So a project charter is a lovely tool to do that. And you can do that in something as simple as a Word doc or a Google Doc, or you can do it in a project management tool.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times, sometimes people use Project Insight like as the request is the charter to some degree. Mm-hmm. But the challenge, I think, with the charter is a lot of times, people overthink it, or, what are the questions? What are the inputs? Obviously the name. What is the strategic benefit we're going to have? What are the budget? What's the budget supposed to be?
Yeah.
How many resources do we need? All those kinds of questions. But a lot of companies take that even a lot further. Maybe too many questions, or sometimes too few questions. So in my opinion, I feel like keeping it really something that you can achieve as an organization that's easy for everybody is really, maybe a little less sometimes than more.
Yeah.
As far as what you're trying to gather, because that is a challenge. Otherwise, like what you said, someone has a great idea out of a meeting, and next thing you know, a project started.
Exactly.
And no one even knows that you have another project going on.
That's right. That's right. Exactly.
So, yeah, that happens all the time. I think it's really hard, especially with nonprofits. Everyone's really passionate, wants to get stuff done. So I think it could be easy to see that not having a formal process around the prioritization of what you're trying to do can be difficult.
Yeah. And to your point, in mission-driven organizations, nonprofits, it's all about impact. Everyone's there for a reason. They're all about the impact. And so you're passionate about the work. Let's just be more efficient and effective with our time. So many nonprofits get, burned out because we're doing all the things, but we're not doing all the things in an efficient way. We're not saying, should we be doing this, right? Mm-hmm. And I do agree that for the project charter, having the right balance of level of detail that you're trying to iron out up front in a charter versus, being too high level. There's definitely a balance there.
And do you have a recommendation on like typical things that people should do on their charter by chance?
I do, and I have a template that I share with clients when I do my training. It's got the basic information, project description, the resources, budget, what you think the budget is, what's the budget source, even some high-level risk planning. And really the intent is for it to be a communication tool. Doing your first draft, you might not have all the answers, but it's a great communication tool so that everyone can be on the same page. It also includes not only what you're going to do. So we're going to have a training, we're going to create this manual, we're going to offer this session, but we're not going to do X, Y, and Z. And so it's really a wonderful tool that you'll flesh out even further or sets you up well for detailed project planning.
Yeah, definitely. And we've talked in our other, webinars about just going back to the charter in the middle. If you're in the middle of the project and things kind of get off track a little, you can always go back to your charter and try to realign yourself to what you initially thought you were going to do.
Absolutely. So, it's not set in stone, but it's a communication tool, right? It's not, well, Steve thinks we're doing this, but Mathew thinks we're doing this. We're all aligned.
Right.
This is what's written. This is what we decided.
Right. And you want to keep it up to date. But if, down the road, especially at the end, you'll be able to go back and say, did we actually knock all these things off if you take the time to put those goals together? And I actually think that not doing it, you end up doing it anyway. Meaning like you didn't do it up front, but along the way you end up filling it all in, and maybe it's not organized very well because you didn't just say, here's where this goes.
That's right.
I want to show kind of what that could look like within the tool, but we also got a wonderful question, and it was, how does a charter differ from a requirements doc? What do you think on that, Stacye?
I don't. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Or Steve, either or.
Well, Stacey's the expert, so you should go for it.
Well, I think a requirements doc is going to have a lot more detail than a project charter. A project charter, you might have like high level scope. And I think more of a requirements document when I'm thinking of an IT project, right? You're a lot more specific. But even for a non-IT project, there are requirements. Requirements could be, we need to make sure we're including community stakeholder input into developing XYZ, and these are the communities that need to be taken into account. We need to make sure the training we deliver is accessible and it meets these requirements. So it might be a little more, it'll have some high level requirements in the project charter, but certainly not the level of detail that you'd have in a formal requirements document. Steve, what would you add to that?
I would say similar, that they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, sometimes the requirements document ends up being the charter because we're just going to get all this done. But like you said, I think a charter has a tendency to outline, well, how, like, the requirement says this is what we need to get done, but the charter is going to say, well, this is the budget for this, or these are the people we need, or this is how we are going to meet these goals, right? So you really need both. But a lot of times, it depends on the project, and obviously, IT projects or technical projects end up having a charter and requirements and work breakdown structure and risks, and then issues during the project and all those things.
Yes.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. Sometimes I've seen organizations where it's one and the same. It is the same doc for them, like Steve's mentioning, or sometimes it's, that charter is my foundation of which the requirements can then get built on as we decide maybe to move it forward, right? Maybe we're going to stop it at that charter time. Within, Project Insight or even, again, to Stacey's point, I can use forms, I can use sheets, I can use all sorts of other things for this. Sorry, Steve, were you mentioning something?
No, sorry.
I was just going to say that, this is a project request form, and the idea is to help formalize that process of taking on work, right? So the idea is, if Steve comes to me and says, hey, I've got this huge new idea that I want you to do, rather than just immediately running with it, right, and saying, like, I got you, that's what it is, we can come in here and say, hey, what does this align with what we're trying to do? What, specifically does this do? What's our priority going to be on this? You can input any additional fields that you may want to. So we do have some organizations who will make this like a charter, which I'll show an example for in a moment. And we have some organizations who will just keep it real high level and then put like a scorecarding system on here. So that way I can help evaluate how this does align with community impact or our mission pieces or our budgetary restraints as far as that's concerned. Is this funded? If it is, we already have the money. Maybe we should move forward on this one right away, right? Versus something where we're still trying to acquire those assets. The nice thing about filling out something like this is it helps formalize that process for selecting what we want to move forward with, right? I can see a list of the backlog pieces that we want. They can include things like budget because that is very important, I think, from this perspective where we can say, yes, it is paid for and here's the amount, and then you can move that process forward. If you like to have the charter, language associated with that, here's an example of what that could look like. You can have that be another tab on that form that we were looking at, or as a standalone document, which is what this is that we're looking at here, where I can say, hey, who's involved? What resources do I need? What's my start and my end? What are those high objectives? So that way I can either morph this into that requirements doc as we go, or if I want to add more fields here, you can readily and then make that be both, right? So it really, though, I think depends upon how formalized your processes are and what you're trying to do more than anything else.
And I think that you really want to do this exercise of, your charter or your request or however, there's a lot of different names for the same concept,
Right.
But having that concept defined, you're going to align those requirements to the charter to say, oh, do these, you can just list out a bunch of requirements, but then you can measure, does this requirement actually help us achieve this original goal? And we actually have a question out in the audience from Glenn. How long in pages are the best charters? This is a trick question. So I guess we all should give it a shot at the answer to see if we get it right.
Who's going first?
You're the expert.
Yeah.
Matt can go first, though.
I'll go first. I'm a big believer in less is more, so that way people will actually look at this document, right? A charter could be, here's my whole book of charter, good luck kind of thing if you want, but nobody's ever going to double back to that to make sure we're aligned with it. I'm a big fan of the one-pagers personally, maybe a front and back if you want to, get into that, but that's my take.
Yeah, I think you want to have a balance of what do you need in order to actually make an assessment of priorities and whether or not the project is meeting the charter. So if you end up capturing too much or asking too many questions, you're really going to lose. You're not going to gain the insight you want out of that. So I'm not saying nothing, but 5 questions, 10 questions, I think is. Yeah, and here Diane, of course, she's one of our experts, says it depends. So yeah, smaller project doesn't need as much, bigger projects need more. We've definitely been over that before. And another comment in the field is as if our requesters will read, which isn't, again, another reason why not to ask too many difficult questions in your requests or in your charters. Keep it something that is achievable and not overwhelming and overburdening your team.
You can also make them required fields in Project Insight as well, so they will have to be forced to read if they're going to get it submitted. So.
I'm not a fan of that.
Oh, I know, Steve. Yeah. I know. It just won't get done. You'll get a sticky note request as opposed to something formalized, right? So.
Well, you don't want to block. You don't want to block people.
Sure.
From doing things. So, when you put too many required fields in, I get that sometimes that makes sense, but if you put too many required fields in any system, then you create a roadblock to capturing the information you need.
Yeah.
And Stacye, your turn, because we all.
That's okay. So I do agree that less is more, but it is a balance. The project charter template that I share with clients is Word document and it's blank. Is 2 pages, so a page front and back. Again, not every project is going to fill it up out every field down to the nth degree in terms of detail. But I will tell you, having that right balance of information, I have introduced this tool to clients who were just doing great work and doing a lot of things. But once they stopped and said, we're going to do project charters for all of our projects that we have going on, that was a wonderful tool to help them decide. Once we fleshed it out and wrote out what it's going to include and not, and talked about it, we decided we're not doing that this year. That's going to be for the following year because we don't have the capacity to do it. When we talked about the idea, we thought it was just, the size of this box. But as we actually filled out the charter and discussed it more, we realized it was this size and it conflicts with these other things we already have on our plate. So it's how you can use the tool is a couple of different ways.
Yeah, and that's the reason to do it. I mean, a lot of people, I think in nonprofits or just a lot of organizations, so many people become like accidental project managers. They didn't get any training, and now the next thing you know, they're running all these projects because they're really good at it or whatever.
Yes.
Just getting it done doesn't mean that you should have done it, and that's where this charter comes in to help you with that. And it's something that it requires a level of project management maturity, and not every organization is there. It takes time and some effort to really get there.
Absolutely. Good stuff. Should we talk about the next step? I'm trying to keep my eye on the time. This is a good conversation.
We may need to speed up a little, but yes.
Okay. All right. Step 3 is all about making planning a discipline and not an afterthought. I have talked to many organizations who jump from project initiation straight into executing. All right, we have this great idea. Now let's just start doing. And that's just not a recipe for success. Planning doesn't have to be heavy, but it does need to be intentional. Otherwise, you're spending your time correcting mistakes and fixing things and second guessing things when you could have had a great plan to execute from all along. So I encourage teams to start their project with a clearly defined scope, timeline, and milestones. If you've already fleshed this out in your project charter, then that's going to help you develop that project schedule. You've got something great to start with. Do you have the resources that you need? And by resources, I mean the people and the money to do this. When you're setting up your project schedule, this is especially where a tool comes in handy, and doing this on a spreadsheet would be painful. When you're setting up your tasks for your schedule, you can easily set up dependencies in a project management tool or set durations and then adjust things, where it's so much easier than Excel. And of course, when project managers are creating this project schedule to say how we're going to do this thing we defined in the project charter, they should not be doing it in a vacuum, going in a corner and doing it themselves. They should be engaging the team who's going to be doing the work. Joe, who does the website updates, knows a lot more about how long it's going to take him to do his part than you do as a project manager, right?
Yeah.
The developer knows a lot more how long it's going to take for them to do their coding piece and the testing and the fixing than you do as a project manager. So you want to engage the people doing the work and developing that project schedule to flesh out that lovely plan of how we're going to accomplish the work together. So I really do encourage folks who are leading work. You might not have the project manager title, but you are leading work. So you are a project manager to get comfortable and skill up in that skill set. And
this is a really important step, because I think sometimes people get, and we see this a lot, where they get hung up on this, having to make it perfect, but having an imperfect close enough is so much better than if you don't do it. Especially when you're talking about estimating your durations, estimating your efforts, that just getting in the ballpark is going to give you a leg up, especially when you start to combine that or multiply that times your whole portfolio. So let's say you're not doing this at all. You just got your project there in the phase, and then each project manager's just planning as they go, being agile or whatever, that's code word for I'm not going to plan. Sometimes, not always, but sometimes.
Often.
But if everybody gives some effort into putting that plan together, now when you run your portfolio report or you look across the whole organization, you're going to get information that will help you. And that exercise is so well worth it. So even if they're not perfect or exactly to a T. Having ability to see at the top, at the high level, oh wow, we're really busy, because these 30 projects now have that data in it.
Well, I think too, both of you mentioned, let's make sure we have visibility into other pieces of work that we're doing. Let's make sure we don't plan within our own vacuum, because the people executing have a better idea of what the effort looks like for them to do the work than I do, right? I have no idea how long the dev team is going to take to build something, but that's what it is. Within Project Insight, we have the ability to templatize and have something to start with from that outline perspective that can include dependencies, that can include the roles needed, the milestones, the estimates. You can then come in here and modify those. I'm looking at a project level Gantt chart here, but if I come in, I have the ability to slide this over and see who's in charge and what the estimated duration is. If somebody comes in and says, hey, Mathew, it's going to actually take me a lot longer, I can slide that out and then watch the rest of my project plan change accordingly based on that. More helpfully is that I can look at my portfolio of what everybody is doing, right? And understand, hey, do people have the bandwidth here? We're pretty deep red in a lot of my roles, right? Other than my project coordinator. So maybe we need to watch the new initiatives we take on, or maybe we need to shrink down what we're doing or push some of our deadlines out because of these pieces. The nice thing about our tool here is that it's one seamless connection, right? I don't need to run one report to do this and do that. As I make these moves and changes happen, my resource allocation is going to work accordingly. And if we are tracking budget as well, it will do the same thing on the budget side of the house as well. So it does make it a lot easier to be able to understand where my resources are and have those assignments planned out as we go.
Yeah, and you'll see conflicts and things like that. But if the team,
Right.
doesn't schedule anything, then you're not going to see anything.
Right.
You're just going to run it. You're going to be. I liked your agile thing, because I think, Steve, I'm just putting out fires left and right agilely. Yeah. I'm very nimble as I have to put out all of these fires, right?
Yeah.
But one and the same.
And what happens is you find out, next week that everybody needs the website developer, and there's only one person that does that, right?
Right.
So finding that out at the last minute is not as nice as knowing that at 3 or 4 weeks out. So,
right.
So even if you have, like we were saying before, a very basic schedule, something is better than nothing here. And obviously we're talking to a lot of professional project managers in our PDU webinar here, and they do this, but not every nonprofit and not even any not every professional organization even goes to the trouble of doing this, especially like IT organizations sometimes tend to just be reactive.
Right.
So.
Absolutely.
Well, we planned it out. Now we need to figure out how to monitor it, right, Stacye, as far as that's concerned?
That's right. And, sometimes I talk to organizations, they say, you know what? We are great with setting up a schedule for our projects, and then we just go and we never look at it again, right? Yeah. So if you set up a schedule, you actually want to use it. And here, for this step 4, you want to decide, how are you going to track progress? Tracking only works if expectations are clear. And a lot of people think, well, I have a tool, so I'm good. But in order for the tool to work for you, you have to be intentional and decide, how are we going to track progress? So how are we going to track our progress against the plan? Are we going to look at our schedule and maybe a weekly short call each week and see, we've got our baseline or our plan schedule, how we're executing against it? What are the actual dates that we're moving things forward? I encourage you to have simple, consistent check-ins. If you're using a tool, do you want team members to update their status directly in the tool, or are you going to have a conversation about it in a team meeting? Set those expectations and those best practices up front as you're starting a project. This is what you do as a project lead, set expectations. And then also you want to determine how data should be reported upward or outward for visibility on your project. It's a lot easier to upfront have a plan of, I'm going to update my project sponsor or my ED or the leadership team on a monthly basis. And you're proactively decide that. They know when to expect that from you. So you're good, as opposed to not having a plan and then having to be reactive when someone reaches out to you and it's fire drill, because you don't have your plan up to date, you don't have a regular process, but they want the information immediately. Someone from the board is asking. So to be intentional about this upfront, how are we going to track with the team? How are we going to report up to leadership and across the organization so that you're not operating a silo, you know?
Yeah, and I think, you know, definitely we talked a minute about putting your plan in and having that data in there. With this is where the tools can really help you. If your team actually can help you by when they get the task and they're collaborating, that they do the work of marking it off, that's sometimes hard to get everybody to buy in there. So let's say you can't get every resource to buy in, at least you can bring up a Kanban board of your project plan in your weekly meeting, like go through and say, okay, are we done with this yet? Oh yeah, boom, move it over. If you keep that project plan up to date every week, that'll help. And especially if everyone's doing it across the organization, if you have 30 projects going on and everyone's doing that's huge. But if people, like you said, if they just, here's our plan, and then 3 weeks later, there's 20 tasks that are done, but no one marked it off, that doesn't really help you. You know, the data does need to be updated, and we try to make it easy by consolidating everything into one database. But definitely I like the idea of at your weekly team meetings, you bring up a visual and you walk through things. Oh, this should have been done. Is it not done? And if it's not done, it needs to be rescheduled, right? And that affects your end date.
Absolutely.
So
one of the nice pieces, you know, I think, well, what we're all saying is if it's in one central location, the fire drills can at least be minimized as far as what you're doing, right? Even if you're out of date on updating it, if it's at least everything's in one spot, we can have all of those quick conversations and get it updated and then report on it accordingly. You know, within Project Insight, you know, we have the ability to go with both of those methodologies. So if we go back into this exact same project plan that we were on, you know, this Gantt chart view that we're on is one of many views that I have, you know, that way it can interact. If I prefer that board view, like Steve was just mentioning, great, I can drag these pieces over and have those meetings as one-off as we go. If I prefer to look at them on a list, I can do that as well, right? Where I'm marking these as done and kind of tracking the progress on here. One of the other points that Glenn mentioned that I thought was really good is that, you know, plan is about preparation, you know, over precision, because things might change. They very likely will. And that's why we do have the ability to save layouts and look at things like where was our original baseline and where have we moved based on that, right? I moved that task out and now my whole project's out 14 days as a consequence. It's good to have that visibility into it so that way you can understand. The other part that I think is helpful here is each of us as the assignees on these pieces, if you want us to update them, we can be getting automatic notifications so that way I, as the project manager, don't feel like that burdensome person that's always coming to you, Stacye, to say, hey, did you do this? Did you update your task? Steve, can you please do something, right? That's where the idea of automation really comes into play. Moreover, I can come in here right to what we call the work list and see all of my relevant assignments right here, right? This isn't things that are happening in December. It's what's happening during this timetable. As I update them here and say that I'm done, or maybe I need help. Maybe I need to tag Stacye and say, help me, please, right? All of that can happen in one central location where it updates the rest of those pieces. So that way, as we may need to report upon what's current and overdue to our executive directors or the board or whoever we're reporting to, it's all done automatically for us, whether we're looking at one singular report or a dashboard view within our tool where I can see, hey, what's happening across the board within the org and our projects. I can see everything in once through that one mouse click as we go through. So,
and I recommend, like what Matt was saying, getting your team involved in the collaboration is huge, because if you can offload the marking things done with letting the resource who's doing the task, they mark it off for you. That saves you as a project manager a lot of time from having to do that. We did have a question, since you've got the screen up. Can you change the dates in a Kanban? And I think we need to show her the planning board does that.
If you do, this will move it over here.
Yeah.
If we go back to our portfolio view, so rather than looking at tasks on a project, right here we're looking at projects on a Kanban board. You can do the same thing here, where I'm moving the effective start date of when this project begins. So rather than, these ones that have already started, if I wanted to say, hey, this guy's actually going to start next month, I can move that over. That would then drive and move all of the other tasks connected with that accordingly. And if you want to change this to be out of weekly to be monthly or quarterly or even yearly, because like what Stacye does with her, clients is, let's plan out the next 3 years and then make sure that we hit that, right? You can drag and drop and move them as you may care to. So.
Yep. All right, let's move on to the next slide.
Yep. It
All
is. Right. We got to be accountable here. Timely.
This is it, right? We're wrapping it up here.
Yeah. Yes. So this is the final stuff we wanted to talk about today, which is closing projects with intention. And I would say of all of the steps that we've talked about today, this is the one that is skipped the most by many organizations. They're excited to get, and this is nonprofit, public sector, private sector, everybody. You're excited to get to the end point, that major event that you've been planning, the final software, you've launched it, and then you want to move on to the next thing because so-and-so has been waiting for you to get started on the next project. But really, it's a missed opportunity when you skip having an intentional closure process. So really at the closure of a process, I encourage teams to have a brief lessons learned, what went well, what didn't go well, recommendations for next time. Did we complete all the deliverables? You might have a checklist of this project from our charter included not only the software, but this training. It had this. Did we do everything we said we were going to do? Were there approvals that were needed? What do we want to make sure we bring into our next project that might be similar to this, right? Because the whole joy and wonder and fabulousness of having an intentional closeout process is that you're building in the habit of continuous improvement in your organization, so that when you do a similar project to this next time, you'll remember, you'll have a list. You don't have to remember. You can go to your lessons learned document or closeout report and say, oh, this happened this time. We're not going to repeat that in this new project. When we plan the next one, we need to make sure we thought development was going to take 2 months and it really took 4. So what do we need to do as we're planning our next project? It really is a just missed opportunity when organizations skip closure.
Sometimes it's even, that idea that I go back to that document and then I have those nightmare flashbacks to what we did wrong, right? Rather than remembering them right off the top of my head. Yeah. I think that's really important. We often will see organizations who will put those pieces into their template within Project Insight, whether it is, this idea of here's my closeout piece where I do have a lessons learned, and maybe it's something that I'm actually filling out within the application, right? This is a pretty lame lessons learned, to be quite honest, but one and the same. It gives us the idea of, did we do what we said we were going to do? Were we within budget? What's my overview or executive summary on what that looks like? So that way we do have something that's centralized to be able to double back to. Moreover, we do have the ability to actually archive a project, and that can put in those mandated checks like you were talking about, Stacye, where it says, yes, Steve signed off on this. Yes, Stacye said this. It was all delivered. Now we officially can mark this as closed. So there are a few different options on how you can do that. So, yeah.
Well, and I think that the lessons learned, getting your team together and getting feedback from the resources on your project, that's where this really helps. It's definitely a step that, I've skipped it before. We end up skipping it, and we, even if you as an individual PM might say, well, here's the lessons learned, and you dump what getting your team involved is a way better approach because they're going to tell you what you don't know.
Right.
So.
And you can even combine it with a celebration, right?
Sure.
You're in this together, right? And so you can make it a celebration and lessons learned all in one, right?
That's even better if you give them champagne or whatever, then you get the total truth.
Well, I don't think you've got to lube anybody up always, Steve, on that. But I did just meet with one of our clients who actually this year they did a reframe of the lessons learned into a celebration. That's literally the vernacular they're now using, because people would go to the lessons learned and come to it as a gripe fest, really, right? Like, oh, we didn't do this and it was terrible, and there was no momentum moving forward. So they still do document what they can do better, but it's a little bit different at that point. Maybe dessert. I like dessert maybe a little bit better than the champagne. You never know.
Well, and sometimes like if we're talking big projects, why not have lessons learned?
Right.
It's the connotation is, oh, you have to learn something because you did something poorly, but that whole exercise can be, here's the award for someone who outstanding performance during this project. Those kinds of things. Start with that, and then you can get the where can we get better? It's both a celebration of what went well as well as what needs to get better.
Right.
Absolutely. One organization that I worked with, and we celebrated with cupcakes. That was our thing. So
I like it. Sign me up. Yeah. Steve, you hear that? Get some cupcakes going here.
Love it.
I'll have a beer.
All right, that's all right. I'll enjoy my cupcake or my sparkling water. Thanks, Steve. As far as where do we go from here, Stacye? Right, is really, I think we may be we've scratched and we've talked to a lot of these different points. What can next steps look like for you and your organization? What do you think on that?
Yeah, it's a lot of information that we've talked about today, right? And it doesn't have to be overwhelming. So you don't have to have every single project management process in place before saying, hey, let's get a tool to amplify it. But I encourage orgs to start with a minimum viable process. Get the basics in place, get a starting point in place. And then once you have that foundation, you can actually add a tool in to help you scale, help you streamline, help you sustain the work, and just be more efficient and effective in achieving your mission, right?
Yeah.
So build that foundation and then have the tool support it.
Yeah.
Well, and then sense. Even when you get a tool, that you'll go with the minimum process of onboarding in the tool, and over time develop more features and things like that. So a lot of times people have these big ambitions. Oh, I'm going to get everything automated all at once, but it does take time, even when you have a tool, to even. So the minimum process identified, then get the tool, and then inside getting the tool, don't go over crazy over that. Try to just use the basics there and build on that over time.
Right. And I think we're here to help as far as that's concerned, right? If you do have questions on how do I get these minimal viable processes in play for my, driven organization, please do reach right out to Stacye. If, you are getting, you have those foundational pieces in play, please reach out to us if you are looking for an application to put those into, as that's the principle. In fact, we're excited to even host an open house after this. So if you do have additional questions, we're going to do a nonprofit office hours on the 5th of May. So come join, bring your questions, bring your what ifs, whatever those look like. Bring your charter, as long as it's not too long for us to review, right? Whatever you may have, we're happy to assist. So get out your phone and scan. You will only get an invitation if you attended and you scan and sign up at this point in time. Keep your phone out as well for your PDU piece. So grab this, fill this out. You will receive your PDU before the end of the week. As far as that's concerned, that'll go out to you via email. We appreciate everybody's attendance and everything else. If you do want to come back to any of the questions or any of the topics that we did discuss, this link will be accessible with this video on it. So please do join again. And we really appreciate everybody's time.
Thanks, Stacye.
We are doing an upcoming webinar as well. So This is around spreadsheets into getting into project plans. So if you do have that minimal viable process of, I'm not using my sticky notes anymore, I'm finally using Excel, right? Let's take it to the next level and turn it into something that you can then scale in with all of the other project management pieces. And we'll look forward to seeing you then toward the end of this month with that. So,
yeah, thanks, Stacye. That was really great.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it. Great conversation. I think we could have gone several minutes longer if we had the time. So
yeah, we're getting arcane. We're getting taken out. So we really do appreciate it. Thank you. Wonderful knowledge from both of you, Steve and Stacye. We really appreciate it as always on the PDUs. If you are not following Project Insight on social of choice, please do so. And here's an easy way to do that. Thank you so much for everybody's time.